Hello, welcome to the Mediocre Takes podcast, the podcast where we share our mediocre takes on the shows and movies we watch. I'm Marco and I'm here with my co host Mel. How are you doing, Mel?
I'm tired and angry.
Today, we're posting this on Halloween, so we're going to be talking about the Fear Street Trilogy. So, happy Halloween, everybody. It's not Halloween when we're recording this, but we hope you have a good Halloween. Before we get into it, I would like to mention that this is my first ever horror movie I've ever watched all the way through. Other than this, I've watched some like Krampus horror movie. I've watched bits and pieces of other horror stuff with my parents before, but this is my first like real horror movie, even though it doesn't feel like horror to me because it wasn't that scary. So if I say anything stupid, please ignore me. Did you find this movie scary at all?
No, I actually found it really comforting because, well, I've been watching like slasher, horror, and gore movies since I was like, I don't know, maybe 9. So there's a lot of references to like classic slasher and horror films in this. It is camp, but it's fun camp.
So we start off this movie with a woman being murdered by her friend, and we start off with our main character Dina writing a letter to her ex Sam. Josh, another one of our main characters, is chatting with someone online about the murder when Dina stops him and says it's time for school. We cut to them going to school where we're introduced to Kate and Simon, who are talking about the shady side witch that possessed the Skull Mask Killer, and the Skull Mask Killer is the guy who murdered someone in the beginning of the movie. Dina asks Kate to give away some stuff to her ex, and Kate says to give the stuff to Sam herself. We cut to Dina and friends going to a band thing where, out of respect for the death of the girl who died at the beginning of the movie, they're holding a vigil. We are introduced to Sam, Dina's ex-girlfriend, who turns out to be a woman. There are lesbians in this movie. Dina and Sam get into a fight while Sunnyvale and Shadyside people get into a fight as well. We cut to the Shadyside band kids on the bus while Sunnyvale students end up following them. The Sunnyvale students get into a car accident because of Dina. The police question the students, but they don't give away anything. And then it's the next day, and Josh wakes up Dina, and Dina tries to call Sam, but that goes poorly because her mom answers, and her mom doesn't like Dina.
Her mom's a homophobe.
Is she?
Yes.
Is that your headcanon?
That is actual factual. I honestly don't remember, but I'm just gonna say she is because it's the 90s. First of all, immaculate soundtrack. We get Nine Inch Nails, Portishead, Garbage, Cypress Hill. I just really appreciate that they managed to have a movie set in the 90s without using a Nirvana song. This trilogy, as I said before, has a lot of references to classic and beloved slasher and horror films. I think that their references were tasteful. You see the obvious inspirations, but I don't think it's too tacky. The first one we see is an obvious reference to Scream with the classic ominous phone call and then the masked killer with the knife. The whole naming situation for the rival cities was sort of like on the nose, with Sunnyvale being like this heaven for rich people and Shadyside being like this poor cesspool. Okay, this is gonna be a real local reference. So if you don't get it, then you don't get it. It's not for you. When I immediately saw like Sunnyvale and stuff, I was like, oh, yeah, that's like Oswego. I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna conspiracize or whatever this early on, but I do love the Sunnyvale mascot is a devil and the Shadyside mascot is a witch, but we'll get to that in the third movie. The weird making out in front of the lockers at the high school gave me like major flashbacks, and I did not appreciate that. I think that this is the first time I've liked all the main characters in a show or movie. They all have very different personalities that either complement or contrast with each other in ways that I like. I really like how they got young looking actors to play high schooler roles. I think that the cast and crew for the shows and movies are getting better at casting age appropriate characters for certain parts. Some of the actors in this are in their 20s, but they at least look young. And the dramatics of the breakup scene were realistic enough for me. I've never experienced that, but I 100% believe that that is exactly how a high school breakup goes. Once again, when they're interviewed by the cops, cops bad. Not surprising, they didn't listen to a couple of kids.
I like that scene where I think his name is Simon says like "fuck you, pig" or something like that.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't feel like it takes place in the 90s to me. Like it has the music, but the script and the feel feels very modern to me. I really like Dina as a character. She's great. I love the fact that we got some like lesbian representation in the beginning of this movie, even if it was a bit messy. I was expecting Sam's boyfriend to be like evil or something when I first watched this movie, but now I feel pretty stupid for thinking that. Also, I know this movie is supposed to be a horror movie, but it doesn't feel like a horror movie. It didn't feel scary to me at all. Maybe I just haven't found like a movie that scares me yet. Dina hears a knock on the door, and when she goes to answer it, no one is there except for a man with the skull mask. She assumes the person is Peter, Sam's boyfriend. Dina calls Kate about what happened. Kate hears a noise and sees someone breaking into the house. They decide to go to the hospital to see Sam because they still assume that the person who broke into the house was Peter. Sam and Dina argue, and then Sam's boyfriend gets murdered, and Sam and Dina end up running away. Dina unmasks the killer, and it turns out to be the same guy from the beginning of the movie. He's supposed to be dead because he was shot in the head. They go to the police station and try to tell the police what happened, but the police don't believe them. And Simon finds some girl who tries to kill him. Josh realizes the girl is a murderer from 30 years ago. He talks about the other murderers in Shadyside. They decide to go to a place where the car crashed and find the body of the witch and realize that the witch is mad because Sam disturbed her grave. Sam realizes they're coming for her. They go to school to change their clothes to make sure none of Sam's blood is on them. They end up changing clothes. Sam and Dina make up and they start to make out, and Kate and Josh end up kissing. I have a small issue with this movie in the sense that they basically sexualize teenagers. This movie follows people playing as teens, though I don't know how old the actors actually are, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable that they low-key sexualize these characters, especially Sam and Dina. Also, the Pound Town joke was pretty stupid in my opinion. I found the murder of Nurse Betty to be kind of disturbing. The whole stab in the neck thing left me feeling kind of weird. There's another murder in this movie we watched that I find to also be more disturbing, but we'll get into that later. Again, this is my first horror movie I've watched with actual murder in it all the way through, so I found it a little bit disturbing when the character was murdered. I find it a bit unbelievable that they believed Josh in the first place when it came to the witch. I don't know, I just feel like if they were in this situation, they would tell Josh to stop being stupid.
First of all, Nurse Betty is a queen. Okay. Also, really great kill. So this first movie doesn't have as many murders as I would say a classic slasher does. That's because it's like this whole story is lengthened into 3 movies. So they really take their time in the first movie. Okay, Marco. I'm gonna let this one thing slide because you have stated that this is the first time you've seen a scary movie. But let me just tell you, frivolous, silly little conspiracy theories are always the first thing to be believed in these types of movies. Okay, so I'm gonna let this slide because you don't know the culture behind it. But when you are watching these things, you just gotta go with it because we all know as watchers, we all know that what they're thinking is stupid and it's obviously something else. But we have to be in the moment and we just have to be like, oh my gosh, you guys are so stupid and I can't wait for one of you to die. Like, that's just the atmosphere you should like envelop yourself in when you're watching these.
They make a plan to bait the murderers. They set the murderers on fire by tricking them with Sam's blood and taking them into the bathroom and then setting the bathroom on fire. They think it's over, but the murderers start regenerating. They decide to leave Sam for dead, but then change their minds and try to create a new plan. Apparently, someone else survived the camp massacre, but in order to survive, she had to die first. So they make a plan to kill Sam and then revive her. They go to the grocery store, I think, or a drugstore of some kind, and make a plan to kill Sam by using drugs and then reviving her. Sam takes drugs, but the murderers come in and ruin the plan by accidentally like stepping on the drugs and setting the drugs all over the place. So instead, Gina tries to murder Sam by drowning her. While this is happening, Kate and Simon die. Rip. Dina manages to kill Sam and revives her. The police officer interrogate Dina and the survivors. Dina thinks everything is over, but she gets a call from the survivor from the camp massacre who tells her that it's not over. We cut to the witch or someone adding Dina onto the list of people to kill while Sam stabs Dina. We cut to Josh chatting online with someone again. Then we cut to Dina and Sam fighting, and the movie ends with Dina and Josh looking at Sam being possessed.
The second recognizable killer we see is based off of Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. He was the camp killer dude. I am So sad that Kate and Simon died, but I also know that that's the name of the game. They all couldn't live, and personally, that made me even more invested in them finding out how to end whatever was going on to like get some sort of justice. I also think it's so funny that Dina gave Sam her favorite sweater and was like, I'm gonna kill you if you get this dirty. She does end up getting it dirty, and then she kills her. And I hope that we're all in the know about the whole bury your gays thing and how writers love killing lesbians. It just felt like some sort of poetic justice with Sam literally dying but then coming back to life. I don't know if you noticed, but at the beginning, Ryan, the guy who became the Skullmask killer, heard whispers and then a fly flew around him before he became like possessed. And then we see that once again with Sam, where she hears a whisper, we hear a fly buzz by, and then she goes all fucking Reagan from The Exorcist. That was a little thing that I noticed the first time I watched this, and I was like, interesting. How far does this go?
I found the way they murdered Kate to be extremely disturbing. They like freaking shredded her head off. It was like so gross and like I don't know, it just freaked me out. I also watched Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared recently, and something like that similar happens in the show, and it's just really freaky, and I hated it and loved it at the same time. And it's been stuck in my head ever since. Like I can't stop thinking about the way they murdered Kate. I really liked how cool it looked when the murderers were regenerating. I don't know, it was just a nice touch to the movie. It was really cool looking. I was genuinely surprised the fact that they killed off Kate and Simon. I'm so used to watching media that's too afraid to kill off its main cast of characters. This and the Harley Quinn show have killed off characters I wasn't expecting and have kept me surprised.
Overall, I think this was a great first part to a trilogy. It really lays the groundwork for the history of the towns and what's possibly going on. It throws a lot of theories and stuff. We get a lot of backstory with Josh. We get a good understanding of our main characters who did not die. Usually, I don't like cliffhangers, but I'm pretty sure all these movies came out at the same time, so I didn't have to wait. Ranking these movies, this is in second place.
This is in first place for me because I haven't watched the other two movies yet. Overall, I think this is a really strong movie. For my first horror, I liked it. That's all I can say about it. Like I said before, I don't know how they like did the regenerating thing when the murderers were set on fire, but that was really cool looking. So we watched Fear Streets Part 2 and 3, and we're here to share our thoughts. I overall liked these movies, but I do have an issue with the third one. We start this movie with our new character Ziggy as she makes food and locks the doors. She hears a knock on the door and it turns out to be Dina and Josh. They show her Sam, and Ziggy starts to talk about the camp where a week later her sister was dead. So then we cut to 1978 and Ziggy is running away from some kids and she gets caught by them, and a girl named Sheila burns Ziggy. They let her go instead of making her go home. Then we meet her sister Cindy as she's cleaning the outhouse with her boyfriend Tommy. Cindy walks in on Alice and her boyfriend having sex as they do drugs. Ziggy goes to the nurse's office and she finds a book with the witch's mark on it. She asks the nurse about it, who explains that her daughter went crazy unexpectedly. Her daughter was Ruby Lane. Cindy and Ziggy get into a fight. The nurse shows up with a knife and tries to kill Tommy. Tommy lives and the nurse is taken away. Cindy and Ziggy start talking again, but they get into another fight about how their dad left and they're going to lose the house. I hate to be that guy to point it out, like again, but there are teen-ish characters having sex and it's really uncomfortable for me. Like the sexualization of teens is just weird. There's another sex scene in this movie, which is gross. Not going to lie, I know these movies aren't that scary. I consider them to be more thriller than horror, but I was genuinely scared for like the first 30 minutes of the movie because I felt so much suspense because I knew everything was going to go wrong. I did take a break after the 30-minute mark, and after that I didn't feel too scared. I will admit I did watch some of these parts at 1.5 speed, but I only watched a little bit on 1.5 speed.
So, I wasn't really a fan of the songs for this movie. I've just heard most of them way too much, especially the fucking School's Out song. You introduced her as Ziggy. In 1994, we think that the survivor of this whole thing is Cindy Berman. We don't find out that it's Ziggy until like the end of the movie. We get a torture scene like 1 minute into the flashback, and honestly, I 100% believe that that is something that would actually happen back in those days. Keep in mind, the first scene we get with Tommy, there's a fly on him, and we also meet Nurse Lane, who, as you said, is the mother of Ruby Lane, one of the people who was possessed and killed other people, who also, by the way, is the woman that Kate in the first film asked to watch the kids she was babysitting. Nurse Slade in this movie is basically meant to be used as a lore drop character. When she goes to attack Tommy, she says that she saw his name and that one way or another he's going to die tonight. And at that point, it was pretty easy for me to connect the dots when I first watched this. Also, in the first movie, Kate mentioned that one of her family members was at this camp. I never really like picked up who that was or like if we even meet them in this movie or not.
So Tommy and Cindy go to the infirmary to see if Nurse Lane was on drugs. They find the witch book, they hear a noise, and it turns out to be Alice. Alice, her boyfriend, Tommy, and Cindy all go to see what was written on the map inside the book. They find Sarah Fier's house. They find the witch's mark. Tommy gets possessed and murders Cindy's boyfriend. Tommy tries to murder Alice, but he fails to because the tunnel they were in collapsed. Nick Good and Ziggy prank Sheila. Cindy tries to leave the cave but goes in a circle, and they realize the witch's mark is a map of the caves they're stuck in. Tommy murders some kids. Ziggy explains that Cindy and her had a good relationship when their dad was still with them. Nick Good and Ziggy kiss, but they find a dead body. And Cindy and Alice find a beating heart thing, and when Alice touches it, she sees dead bodies and starts running and hurts her leg. The campers, including Nick and Ziggy, all hide out after seeing the dead body, but Ziggy realizes she left Sheila behind, and so Ziggy goes after her.
I hated the lengthy scenes where we get like two characters who are just talking. We get a few of those throughout this movie. It was so fucking boring. Like, I know it's meant to help us become more attached to the characters, but I couldn't vibe with it. It was so boring. There's so much of it, and it's mostly between Cindy and that blonde bitch, who, first of all, was done so dirty in this whole movie. Spoilers, so much shit happens there that she does not deserve.
So the murder of Alice's boyfriend was really cool. I really liked it. Most murders I'm not like the biggest fan of, at least so far in my horror journey. I really liked that murder scene. It was just really cool. Like when he split the head open and everything.
Yeah, I remember.
Also, just like the past movies, I feel like this movie feels to feel like the 70s. I'm not from that time period, of course, but I don't know. It felt the dialogue felt too modern. I don't mind that much since it's a pretty fun movie. I just feel I have the need to point that out. I have mixed feelings about Ziggy. She's petty and a bit mean, and I love her for that. But at the beginning of the movie, she was a bit too petty. And the characters so far are okay. I feel like the characters from 1994 were a lot stronger compared to the characters in this movie, especially Alice. She's kind of annoying. There's another sex scene which is gross. Cindy and Alice make up. Ziggy finds Sheila and Sheila starts fighting Ziggy, but Ziggy knocks Sheila out. Ziggy and some dude who dies find Cindy and Alice, but before they can rescue Cindy and Alice, Tommy murders the unimportant character and Ziggy runs away. Ziggy finds Nick Good. Cindy and Alice discover there's another way out of the caves. Alice finds Sarah Fier's hand. Cindy finds an exit but is stuck, and Ziggy runs from the murderer. Ziggy stabs Tommy, but Tommy survives, and then Cindy, after finding a way out, stabs Tommy again, but he still survives. Tommy dies, and Ziggy and Cindy make up. Alice, Cindy, and Ziggy, after finding Sarah Fier's hand, realize they could end the curse. The other murderers start regenerating because Ziggy bled on Sarah Fier's hand. Alice dies because Tommy comes back alive and murders her. The murderers come after Ziggy and Cindy as they go to put away Sarah Fier's hand and return it to her body. Ziggy and Cindy both die. Nick revives Ziggy by giving her CPR. So we're back in 1994, and Dina tells Ziggy that they found the body of Sarah Fier and they just need the hand to end the curse. They ask Ziggy where the hand is, and it turned out to be in the Shady Side Mall. Dina and Josh find the hand. Ziggy calls Nick Good. Dina returns the hand, and she's taken back to 1666. And that's the end of the second movie. Okay, I've wondered this ever since I watched the movie, but whatever happens to Sheila? Like, does she get murdered after being knocked out? She deserves it, honestly, for burning Ziggy. But I'm just really curious, does she survive or not?
She wasn't a shady side person, so I'm assuming she didn't get murdered.
I really like that line where Ziggy says, "And I wish I stayed dead," and the lines that she says after that. The writing in these movies can be kind of silly and overdramatic at times, like when Nick Good is interviewing Dina after Kate and Simon died, but the writing felt pretty decent in those few lines, I guess. Also, I know this is just a silly little horror movie, but there's no way Ziggy could have survived after being stabbed that many times. Like, girl should have stayed dead. Also, Josh seems confused on who Ziggy is, and I feel like it was pretty obvious. Like, they didn't make it a twist or anything, and it should have been pretty obvious. I don't know. It was weird.
The guy who gets beheaded in the bathroom stall, by the way, was also in the 2018 film Halloween, where he died a pretty funny death. Rip Alice, she carried this. I know you don't like her, but honestly, she carried this movie in many ways. I will say though, her death was also like pretty funny. Like, just like the fact that she gave this speech or whatever, and then she was like, let's do this, and then she immediately gets killed. That is so funny. Like, as you said, the plot twist wasn't really huge. I was able to figure it out pretty quickly, mostly just based off the hair. Like during the flashback, I sort of connected the dots pretty quick. Like her hair, there are hues of orange, and I know that when you have like really blonde or really orange hair as a like younger person, that usually dulls throughout time. So I just use my context clues because I'm really smart. And it was also a pretty stupid plot twist.
I know you like Alice, but like, I don't know. She got kind of annoying with her. You used to be all about fun, but now you're too blah blah blah. And I don't know. It was kind of annoying.
That was funny though. I just
Was
like
it?
that she was I just think it's so funny that she was just like so angsty and so doom and gloom. I was like, "You go, girl."
Overall, I found this to be a pretty decent horror movie. I think that the murders are nice. I didn't find any of them disturbing like the last one. I also found Ziggy to be a really interesting main character. I really like her as an adult, but I feel like we don't really get enough of her in this first movie, and I really wish there was more to her as a character other than the fact that she's sad and brooding and is sad about the fact that her dad's gone and everything like that. Like, of course she grows, but I mean, I just want more from her. Overall, pretty nice movie.
If you look at the structure of each movie, it follows what you would see in one scary movie. 1994 establishes the world, we're introduced to the main characters and the main mystery. 1978 was basically the information gathering portion of the story. Its job was literally to lore dump, and lore dump is what they did. I will say though, it has a lot more child murder than almost every slasher movie I've seen. Usually the victims are older teens or young adults, so it was actually pretty hard to watch some of those scenes. I was not a fan of the sex scenes. It makes sense in the way that this was obviously heavily inspired by Friday the 13th. Those movies have a lot of sex scenes in them. There's a pretty common trope in slasher movies that like only virgins survive, but I do think that in these movies they could have had those scenes have less flesh showing. I will say, from a logistical standpoint, it doesn't make sense that Ziggy would know what Cindy was going through, why we get to see her side of the story if this flashback is being told by Ziggy. That wasn't really something I thought about the first time I watched it, and I get it because they're sort of trying to be like, "Ooh, this is what happens to Cindy," but it also doesn't make sense because if this was Cindy, then why are we seeing what Ziggy did? But yeah, I don't know, that just sort of annoyed me. Yeah, this is my least favorite movie from the trilogy. It has all the parts of slasher movies that I don't really like, and the victims were just way too young. Couldn't vibe with that.
Okay, now we're moving to Fear Street Part 3. Okay, so we're back in time in 1666. Sarah has to give birth to a pig. Sarah goes to see Solomon Good and gives him a pig. Hannah and Sarah also talk about going to some place. Hannah and Sarah and another girl go to see a witch of some kind. At least that's what I thought she was, but I'm not quite sure. They enter a hut and no one is there. Sarah finds a book about making a deal with Satan. The witch comes and threatens to kill her. They take some drug berries, like berries that get you high or something like that. Sarah and Hannah make out. Then it's the next day and Hannah notices there's something wrong with her father and he's not himself. Thomas caught Hannah and Sarah and told people they kissed. Sarah confides in Solomon because she feels something is wrong with her. The pastor has trapped the children in the meeting house. They open the door and they find the pastor has murdered the children. Something interesting this movie does is that they have the actor who plays Dina and some other characters in the first movie play characters in 1666. Like Dina plays Sarah Fear and Sam plays Hannah. At first I wasn't a big fan of this, but I kind of like it now. Like it was a bold choice. The guy who played Simon also played a character in 1666, and I'm not a big fan of his performance compared to the other actors. But I don't know, these actors can act. Like I don't know how they do it. They have range. It's an interesting way to show how Sarah and Dina's stories are similar to one another. Also, again, this movie has some issues with historical accuracy. I know it's not that big of a deal, and that this movie is for a fun time and not for a historically accurate time, but I just feel the need to point it out.
So we are thrown into yet another flashback, but this time through the eyes of the alleged Wicked Witch Sarah Fear. You talked about how, like, you know, they recycle characters. By the way, I'm not sure if you noticed this. Sarah Fear is a different person. So if you look at the reflection, like the first scene you see when there's a flashback, Sarah Fear and Dina are two different people, but Dina is like in the position of Sarah Fear, which I thought was interesting. Okay, anyway, my theory is that they were reincarnated, which makes total and complete sense to me because if you remember in 1994, the thing that gets the ball rolling is Dina randomly getting a nosebleed, which is weird because the only instances we've seen nosebleeds is when they're interacting with Sarah Fear. And when Sam touches Sarah's body, we hear Sarah say, "It's you." Now, why the hell would she say that if she didn't remember what her lover looked like? She does also say, "It's you" to Solomon, but I choose to ignore that. As I've stated before, I don't do any research on the things that I watch, so I could be completely wrong, but I'm just gonna pretend that I'm right. Yeah, this is basically the Crucible, you know, a classic witch hunt. Let's kill women, they all used to say back then.
Sarah's brother dies, and the pastor is about to kill Sarah, but Solomon kills the pastor. They decide they need to root out all the evil and blame Sarah and Hannah. Hannah gets caught, but Sarah runs away. Sarah decides she's going to show them what a true witch is capable of and goes to the witch's house. She goes to the witch's house and finds her dead. She runs to Solomon and tells him the woman is dead and he hides her. It turns out Solomon made a deal with Satan and betrayed everyone. Solomon tries to kill Sarah but only cuts off her hand. Sarah gets caught by the mob. Cutting of the hand scene was freaky. I hated seeing it get cut off and it was kind of gross. And Solomon is an asshole and I hate him. And that's all I have to say.
I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, fuck Solomon. That dirty, stinky man. In 1994, his fucking descendant or whatever is also a dirty, stinky cop. So I expect nothing less from the first in his family tree.
Sarah sacrifices herself by saying only she was the one who was the witch in order to save Hannah. They hang Sarah, and Hannah and friends decide to give Sarah a proper burial. We cut back to the present where Dina has connected the hand to body and Sheriff Good has found them. Dina and Josh run away from Sheriff Good. They take the police car and go to see Ziggy. The murderers are awakened and start coming after Dina. They come to see Martin, who in the first movie we didn't mention him, but he's the guy who got arrested for having spray paint. And then later in the movie, we find the spray paint in Good's bag.
By the way, he also says when Sheriff Good puts him in a holding cell or whatever, he's like, "Sheriff Good, more like Sheriff motherfucking Evil." They were telling us from the beginning.
So they go to see Martin to help kill Sheriff Good. They go to Shady Side Mall and make a plan. Some cops come to stop the group, but they get murdered by the Shady Side murderers. They trap the murderers using Dina's blood and splash some of the blood on Sheriff Good, and Sheriff Good does get stabbed, but the plan fails and Sheriff Good runs away. Dina goes after Good to kill him. More murderers show up. Dina is about to get murdered by Good, but Dina makes Good touch the heart thing in the cave and he sees visions and gets murdered by Dina. Sam and Dina leave, and the names on the stone and the witch's marks start to disappear. They walk into what seems to be the Good's house. They walk outside and see a car accident. We cut to Josh and Dina going to school. We also see Ziggy going to talk to Nurse Lane. Dina and Sam go to Sarah Fear's grave and they kiss, and that's how the movie ends.
Marco, was that the end though?
Oh yeah, okay. We also see someone grab the book.
The flashback was the last info dump we get. It gives us the rest of the pieces we needed to complete the puzzle. well. We get a Home Alone trap montage, which was pretty fun to watch. You know, something fun for the girlies to do. We get that Carrie moment that was robbed from us, or at least robbed from me in 1978. The final boss fight was pretty fun. I just love that the lesbian ghost helped the other lesbian to finally end the satanic curse a dirty white man casted on innocent people. Also, the whole book stealing at the end was so like fuck you. But it was also kind of normal in horror movies, especially like the older ones like, "Oh, you thought the evil was gone? Think again. Like you didn't kill the killer. He's still out there." I'm not too mad though. I doubt they'll do anything with it in regards to like making more movies, especially since Netflix fucking sucks.
So I kind of think having Nick good be evil all along could be a really interesting twist, but there are too many problems with it and it left me asking a lot of questions. Like why did he give Ziggy that note at the beginning that it's happening again if he knew what was happening in the first place because he's the guy who made the deal with Satan? Like if he was the murderer, why did he give that note to Ziggy?
Actually, so it's pretty common for the killers to pretend to not be the killer and be like, "Oh, what is this? What is happening?" To me, it was like pretty obvious that he was trying to protect her because he likes her, but he also didn't want to, tell her like, "Yeah, I know what's going on." He just wanted to warn her.
Well, this is what I was gonna say next is does he actually like her? Because he was going to kill her at the end of the third movie.
I do think that he did genuinely like her, but also I think that he would never risk his position of power to be with her.
This is another thing that I was like confused about. Why did he choose to save Ziggy in the first place? Like, I get that he liked her, but he should have been smarter about things and let her die. If he knew Ziggy was close to finding the truth, he would have let her die. Like, there's a difference in the way he's acting. I think it could have been interesting if we learned more about him and see how this character changes over time. Like, if he at first is like, oh yeah, I really love this girl, I'm going to save her, to I don't care anymore, I want this power. But we don't get that. And I feel like it would have been really interesting and cool if we did. I just feel like it needed to be hinted at more. And I feel like we need a better look at his character because his decisions don't make sense to me in the first two movies compared to the third. Also, the part where Dina says good is bad was so cringe to me. Like, it was a bit too on the nose, you know?
I think it was perfect.
I really like adult Siggy. She's perfect in every way, and I wish you got to see more of her. Also, this is something you mentioned, but I'm going to go into it anyway. We get a like this isn't over type ending, which I kind of hate. I hate when movies or TV shows go like, oh wait, it's not really over because it ruins everything the characters went through. We did see someone grab the witch book, but I doubt we'll get anything from it, like you said. I'm glad about because I want this to be over. Not in a bad way, like
That sounded like you were so tired of this shit.
no, I'm not tired of this movie. I actually really like these movies. I just want it to be over because I feel like I want everything to be tied up in a nice bow, you know? I don't want it to be ruined by, but wait, there's more. Also, there's no way, like I said before, Sheriff Good would survive after being stabbed like that. Like, he would have at least been out of it a bit.
All I want to say about this trilogy is that I love that they took the classic trope of evil curse and spun it into a story about how people who want status and wealth will take it no matter how many people have to die. And once they've attained that position of power, they will twist history and do whatever it takes to keep that position. And that's why this is camp.
Overall, I feel like this is a pretty decent horror trilogy. For my like first few horror movies, I genuinely enjoyed these and I feel like that's the best praise I can give it.
I am so happy that we got lesbians in a slasher film. Like, you don't really see that.
And they didn't die.
Netflix, you did one thing right.
Anyways, you guys, those are our thoughts on the Fear Street trilogy. If you want to send us a voice message on Anchor, there will be a link in the description below. We also have a TikTok, Twitter, and an Instagram, which you can also follow in the description below. And that's everything. So goodbye.
And happy Halloween. Guys, happy Halloween. Check your candy for drugs. If you're taking drugs, do it in moderation. And be careful at night.
Okay, goodbye.